Hi everyone, it's Lindsay. Welcome back to another video. Today I want to share with you some 5-minute card ideas. Now I have already blogged about this. I will leave that link down in the description box below, but I do have a video for all those blog posts that haven't had videos. They are coming. I just got a little behind with baseball season this past month. It's been a little crazy. So I'm going to go ahead and get caught up. So I am working on 5 different cards today. I have panels all ready to go and card bases all ready to go. That is something, if you are working on a quick card, make your card panels, make your card bases, do a bunch of them at once and get them out of the way. Something else that has helped me immensely that I refused to do for years is swatching my inks. However, once I did it, I go to this so incredibly much. So I do mine a little different. I just go ahead and on a 2x2 piece of cardstock, I stamp a strip of the ink pad. I put what ink pad it is. So CP is Catherine Pooler. I've got some Memento Dewdrops. And then I put the name at the bottom. I just write these in, nothing fancy. I put a little punch in the top left-hand corner and put them on this little ring that my husband got for work, but I stole them. So I have one for my dye inks. I have one for my pigment inks. And then on my pigment inks, I also have some of them, not my VersaFine Clair, but some of my other pigment inks. I also do a strip of black cardstock on the back with a stamp on that of the ink itself so I can see what it looks like on dark cardstock. Then on this ring, I also have my Stays On and my Stays On pigment inks. Those, I will leave a link to that video down in the description box below. I do those differently from my regular ink swatches, so you can check that out. Why I do mine differently, first of all, is because if I just swatch them with like a circle in the middle, I really need to see the colors up next close to each other. That's why I do a full strip across them. So I can put them up against each other, see what they're really going to look like. I can flip through my little swatch booklet, kind of pull them out. So here I've got my 3 colors that I'll be using today, and I can see what they look like right next to each other without any white space between them. That is something that helps me so much. I joke a lot, like I have to ask my husband, does this match before I walk out the door? Because I'm horrible at pulling colors together. And once I find a color combination that works, I tend to go back to that over and over. So I get stuck in a rut a little bit. So that helps me break out of it. Another thing, whenever you are working on quick cards, make sure you are getting the best possible stamped image the first time. I don't like to pull out my Misty a whole lot when I'm doing quick cards. I like to just use an acrylic block. So what I do when I'm stamping, especially solid stamps like this, I put a piece of fun foam underneath my stamping. That gives it a little bit of cushion. It helps me get a nice image each time I stamp. That helps me immensely. It will probably help you too, especially with your clear stamps. That's really going to help you. This way, you don't have to start over. So my first card, I'm doing a quick, simple background. I like to stick with what I know whenever I'm doing quick cards. So I'm going to make backgrounds and add some sentiments to them. A lot of times I'll just make a bunch of backgrounds, keep them on hand, maybe make a card out of them and leave the sentiment off. Then I can just pull out the cards as I need to, add my sentiments and go. That helps me a lot. I forget birthdays, so it is what it is. A lot of times I have to pull from that, and that's okay. Anyway, so I'm using this stamp from Cracker Box and Susie Stamps. It is a brushstroke stamp set, and I just made a super quick background with some Catherine Pooler inks. Now, this is one instance where I am going to pull out my Misty and stamp my thank you sentiment. I wanted to do this, so I made sure that I got the darkest image possible, the darkest stamp possible. And I knew I was going to have to stamp this more than once to get the intensity that I wanted. So I'm going to go ahead and ink this up with my Midnight ink from Catherine Pooler and stamp that right over. I line this thank you up in between 2 of my little paint strokes, and I'm just stamping that down. Whenever I'm doing quick cards and I'm doing very simple cards, I like to use big, bold sentiments. I think that really helps pull the whole card together. You don't have to add a whole lot to it this way when you're using those big, bold stamps. So to finish off this card, I'm going to go ahead and continue to move my panel up and down and stamp that thank you over and over in between each one of the little paint strokes. This is a quick way to fill up that background and to really just add a lot to the pattern itself. If you don't like the look of stamping in between, you could always just stamp on the actual paint stroke itself. That would work too. I stamped in between just to fill in a little bit of that white space. I added a nice little black cardstock mat. I like to keep my mats very simple. I go with craft or black on my quick cards. I don't add any dimension normally, so I just use some liquid adhesive on that, put it all onto a white cardstock base, and it was ready to go. So on to my next card, I am going to go ahead and use another one of those brush stroke stamps. This is the small square one from Cracker Box and Susie Stamps, and I chose my inks in exactly the same way. Got out my little ink swatches, placed them up against each other, and found two colors that I thought went together. So I'm using Aquatini and Lime Ricky. These are both from Catherine Pooler Inks. Again, I'm stamping on that fun foam on my white cardstock panel here. All of my panels measure slightly smaller than A2. I'm going 3 3/4 by 5 inches. I like to go in quarter inches whenever I'm doing quick cards. That way I don't have to do a whole lot of guesswork. So here's another tip. I messed up on my stamping. I didn't line this up the first time I started stamping. That's okay. You have another side of cardstock you can use. You do not need to cut a new panel. As long as nothing bled through, flip it over and use the other side and go from there. If you screw up, you always have that other side that you can use. Don't throw away your panels. And if you can, fix it. If not, flip it over. Super simple and easy to do. So I started off with Aquatini. I stamped in the center first and then went to both sides so it was evenly spaced. Then I'm going to come into each one of those little kind of triangles that this pattern made and stamp right down below that, offset a little bit with the Lime Ricky ink and connecting those two. So it makes a nice little kind of argyle. Is that the pattern I'm doing here? I don't know. A nice little pattern here. Reminds me of a quilt and I like it. So I'll go ahead and continue that pattern all the way down the panel. Something else that really helps me, especially with quick cards and cleaning off my stamps a lot with these background patterns, is having some baby wipes on hand. I don't like to use baby wipes a ton. It just creates a lot of waste. So I save them for quick cards like this where I really want to go quickly and kind of move things along fast. Then I'll go in with my baby wipes. Otherwise, I use just um, an old washcloth a lot of times, or like a cut up towel I use a lot, and then just some water to clean my stamps. So to finish this off, again, I used a nice bold sentiment from Cracker Box and Susie Stamps. Happy birthday. Stamp that on some vellum with Versify or with the Stays On Pigment ink in the brown color. I added craft little strips to that to kind of separate it from the background. I used vellum because I didn't want to cover up that pattern. Then I attached that panel onto a craft mat and put the whole thing onto a card base. There are my two brushstroke pattern backgrounds ready to go. I've got my thank you card and a birthday card. These could be turned into whatever cards you need quickly. All right, so let's move on to my next set of cards here. So again, I'm going to pull out my ink swatches here because I want to find some colors that go together. This just breaks me out of my shell quite a bit. On this card especially, I used two colors that I really wouldn't have pulled together. Now, the great thing too about Catherine Pooler inks are they are kind of curated into collections already. So if you don't want to swatch your inks as well, which I highly recommend you do, but if you don't, you can always pull from the same collection, like the Basics collection, or there is the Spa collection. You can pull colors from that, and those are all going to go together, which I think is just a brilliant idea for an ink line. So I went ahead and pulled out Shea Butter. I am using Pixie Dust for my purple color, and then Over Coffee is going to be my outline color. Now for these next two cards, I am going to be using these outline and then kind of the filler image stamps from Cracker Box and Susie Stamps. This first one is called Ranunculus. It comes in a set of two, so you get the solid, you get the outline. Now I have used these before, the wispy ones that I'll be using on my next cards. And I love those. You can line these up and create some really beautiful cards. But to create quick backgrounds and more interest, I like to offset them a little bit. You don't have to use a stamp positioner. I do have a video on that. I will link that down in the description box below as well if you want to watch all about how to use these stamps and line them up the best way possible to do that. I'll leave that link down in the description box below. But I quickly just filled in my background with those two little colors, the Shea Butter and the Sweet 16. I think I said I used Pixie Dust before. I used Sweet 16. And then I'll go ahead and very, very quickly over each one of these images, I'm just going to pull out that over coffee ink up the outline, and stamp it down very quickly. I'm not going to line these up at all. It's going to be offset, which gives a fun look. As long as you don't kind of your as long as your intention is to offset it, I think the recipient gets the point that that's part of the design. So I like to go ahead and offset these, kind of move it around, play with the placement a little bit, and stamp it down. And I love this over coffee color. It is a really, really, really pretty brown color. It's nice and soft. Now you can see to my fun foam, I have added a piece of computer paper to that. That's something you want to do because that's going to catch all your extra ink. Foam naturally is going to soak up that ink. It's going to hold on to it, and it's not going to let it dry. So anytime you go and you place your finger on it, you place another panel over it, it's going to pick up that color. Now, another one of my tips for making quick cards is don't use products that need dry time. That really hinders me, especially with cards like this where I have a lot of white space and I want to fill that in with like Nuvo drops or some embossing powders or something like that, you know? So here's my workaround. I went on to Amazon. I bought some Sharpies, metallic ones. So they have gold, they have bronze, they have silver. I just bought a pack of them. And any color of Sharpie will do as well. They've got all different kinds. You can get them on sale with the back to school sales. So I like to use those and fill in all those little white space just with little dots. Super easy to do, but these metallic Sharpies add a little bit of shine. There's not going to be any dimension, so if that's something you don't like with the Nuvo drops, this is going to be your best friend. And I like to just use those and go ahead and place those in all the areas where I think it needs a little something extra. Something else that helps me a lot with quick cards is not using liquid glue. I love liquid glue. I went back to using it for most of my cards, and I still use it on quick cards. But if you are afraid of the dry time, you can switch over to tape adhesive. I buy mine from Amazon. You can buy it from scrapbook.com. They have really, really great adhesive there as well. And just use it for quick cards like this when you're in a hurry. That will help you with the dry time of liquid glue. As long as you don't use a ton of liquid glue, you should be safe. But if you are an over gluer, especially on your quick cards, you might want to switch to tape adhesive. If not, use your liquid glue sparingly. It should dry in just a little bit of time. So I went ahead and matted that panel down onto craft cardstock. Again, when quick cards are in play, I like to go ahead and keep my mats to craft in black or white. And then I also do no die cutting, but you will notice that this card did have die cutting on it. That is because whenever I'm doing quick cards, if I think it needs a die cut, I have this little cup that I keep off to the side of my desk with all these extra die cuts in it. I will pull from that for my quick cards, or I'll pull from that just to make a super quick card anytime that I need one, and I'll just use die cuts. It doesn't even have to have any stamping. But I like to go ahead and pull from that whenever I'm doing my quick cards, so I don't have to get out my die cutting machine and all that stuff. So I used a craft heart that I cut out, stamped my best wishes onto a piece of vellum, and put that behind the heart to finish off this card and to hold my sentiment. Now on to my next card. Like I said, I would be using that same kind of stamp set where it has the outline and it also has the solid image to fill it in. This is the Wispy Chrysanthemum. This is again a set of 2 that you can buy. And again, I went back to my ink swatches and grabbed 2 colors that I wouldn't normally use together. I'm using limoncello and I'm using the rock and red. And I'm going to go ahead and stamp the solid images first. You can stamp the outline first, but I find it best to leave that for last and then go in with the solids first, especially when I'm using dye inks. So once I have that all stamped, I'm going to go ahead and come in over the top of that with my next color and my outline, which is Twilight, and I'll just stamp that down. Again, offsetting this, making sure that it's not going directly over the top. That's part of this look that we're going for. Now, I especially love the look of this stamp set doing this technique. It's such a cool one, especially because all those little wispy lines are so, I guess, kind of pointed, and I don't know, it's one of those ones where it lines up perfectly when it lines up, but then when you stamp over the top, you really have that offset look, which is just so cool. So I'll continue twisting this around and offsetting it and just stamping out that background. And then when I'm done, I'm going to go ahead and take this a little bit further, and I'm using my Sharpie again. I didn't want to go in with Nuvo drops because of that dry time. So I'm using my Sharpie and adding little dots to the centers of these flowers. I'm using two different sizes. I keep both on hand in my craft room. I'm using the larger regular one, and I'm also using a fine point Sharpie. You can use any black alcohol marker for this. I just happen to have these on hand. So I added my bigger dots, and then I'll come in with my smaller Sharpie and add that in. I also went ahead and used that same black Sharpie, the larger one, and added little dots in the white spaces, just like I did with my gold Sharpie, just to fill in those white spaces, add a little bit more interest, but not have that dry time, and it's such a fun look. There's a closer look at the little dots inside the flowers. It adds a lot of interest to this very, very simple card, and you get a nice closer look at that offsetting of the stamped images, which is just so neat. So once I had that done for this particular card, I matted it onto a black mat, attached that to a card base, a white card base. And then for my sentiment, I used a Celebrate sentiment on just a little strip of cardstock that I cut at an angle to make into a little bit of an angled flag banner. I attached that to the left-hand side. There's a closer look at both of these styles of cards that I made. A lot of tips and tricks how to make those very quick, and it was a lot of fun putting those together. So now on to my last card. This is a little bit of a bonus one. This is if you don't want to pull out any stamps other than a sentiment. I thought this was a really fun technique and I wanted to share it with you. This literally took 2 minutes to make this card. I mean, it was super duper quick. So I have my rainbow assortment of colors here. I've got rock and red, limoncello, grass skirt, flirty fuchsia, and something borrowed. Again, I used my ink swatches and pulled those colors from that. Now I have my cardstock panel ready to go, and I've just got a little bit of computer paper behind this to catch any extra ink. Now with the ink pads, I'm just going to take them and starting from the left side of the cardstock panel, pull them in and swipe them onto the card panel. I started with the green in the middle, so I got a good idea of where I needed to go with the colors. I have a hard time laying things out, so I find it best to start in the middle and work my way to the edges to line everything up. And then I'm just swiping. You can see I messed up with the blue right there. Don't start over. Just if you mess up, try and find a way to fix it. You can flip this over if you wanted to. I decided to go with it. I knew I could cover the majority of this up just by building up the ink first of all, and then anything that was left over I could cover up with my sentiment. So this wasn't a huge mistake. Just keep going and work through it. I'm going to continue to go over all of these colors again and again until they're a little bit blended. I want to deepen up that color. I want to bring those stripes pretty well across the card panel. I'm not going for a really clean look here. I wanted this to be very quick, something you could do in a matter of minutes. So I'll continue going over these and building up that color. Now you can see as I continue to build this, that blue little dot, or I guess that I got with the foam pad, it's going to start to disappear and blend in. It's also going to blend in as this ink dries. This ink settles into the paper and it's going to disappear, I promise. And anything that doesn't, you can see I covered up with my happy birthday sentiment strip. So keep going, cover it up. It's not that big of a deal. I matted this panel onto a black mat, attach the whole thing to a card base. I did pop up my happy birthday sentiment a little bit on the front with some foam tape, and that card was done. Super duper simple, 2 minutes to make it. Now, all these cards were 5 minutes or less. I included a lot of tips and tricks, so I hope you guys found it all helpful. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me through this long video, and that is going to do it for me today. Don't forget all the information that's down in the description box. Happy crafting, everyone!